Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about when I predicted COVID-19. I predicted it way before it happened because I have proof in my book, Rahu and Ketu. I wrote this book, Rahu and Ketu, Our Karmic Destiny Through Eclipses. I wrote it in 2017. And what the book is actually about are that the eclipses are one of the most powerful tools for prediction that we have. And what an eclipse actually is, they're not rare. They happen twice a year. And it's when the sun and the moon align with Rahu and Ketu. So when you have a solar eclipse, it's when you have a new moon, which is when the sun and the moon are together, conjunct either Rahu or Ketu. And then 6 months later, you will have another eclipse where the sun and the moon come together with Rahu or Ketu. So one will be with Rahu, and 6 months later the other one will be with Ketu. And whatever sign they're in really depict what's going on. And to take it a little deeper, the nakshatras too. But aside from just the alignment of the sun, the moon with Rahu and Ketu and the sign they're in, I also found that when you have other planets aligned with these eclipses, they will definitely give a sense and a feeling of what will happen. Such as on September 11th, we had Rahu in Gemini, Ketu in Sagittarius, but we also had Rahu with Jupiter. When you have the nodes with Jupiter or Saturn, they are eclipsed, in other words, and it's not good for that planet. Let me put it that way. Jupiter, which is the great benefic, is not good with Rahu. But Mars was with Ketu. Mars was the planet that comes around and triggers the event. So it may not happen on the day of the eclipse. Of course, it happens like the time after when Mars comes and triggers it. So looking at this, I started to notice how every time that Rahu was in Gemini and Ketu was in Sag, something catastrophic always happened. And I write about this in this book. This is before COVID. And so I talk about 9/11. That's when Rahu was in Gemini, Ketu was in Sag, Ketu was with Mars, and Jupiter was with Rahu. Then taking it back 18 and a half years earlier, because Rahu and Ketu, they stay in a sign for 18 months. So they stay in a sign for a year and a half. But in order for them to go through all of the 12 signs, circle all the way back, it takes 18 and a half years. So every 18 and a half years, we're going to get them aligned in the sign of Rahu in Gemini and Ketu in Sag. So going back 18 and a half years prior to September 11th, I found that it was the AIDS virus. This was around 1982, 81, 82, the AIDS virus. It was catastrophic. If you weren't around during this time, people didn't know what caused it, and there was enormous fear. People were dying, and it was a terrible death, the AIDS virus. So that was 81, 82. Take that back 18 and a half years from that, that's 1963, and that was Kennedy's assassination. Take that back 18 and a half years from that, 1945 was the bombing of Hiroshima. All of these times were when Rahu was in Gemini and Ketu in Sagittarius. So here it is, 2017, and I'm writing about these nodes. And I go into, on page 130, future predictions. Yes, based on the analysis of history, the years of 2019 and 2020 look like a dangerous time. Rahu will be in Gemini, Ketu in Sagittarius. Wow. And I also go into how by the end of 2019, this was the end. This is when it really hit, right? Saturn and Jupiter will conjoin Ketu in the nakshatra Mula. Mula is the nakshatra of destruction in the sign of Sagittarius. And Rahu will occupy the nakshatra in Gemini, Ardra, which symbol is a teardrop in sadness, while Mula is ruled by the god of destruction. And Ardra is ruled by the storm god, Rudra. Anyway, those are the placements in Gemini and Sag. And I put by the end of January 2020, Saturn will transit into Capricorn while Mars is in Scorpio. And this is called and Ketu and Jupiter in Ketu in Sagittarius. So I go into that this was a very malefic aspect and a malefic time. And I said from February 8th to March 23rd, 2020, that this suggests a breakdown, get this, of corruption in governments, and that this would be a time that would change the world forever. And get this, do you not realize that around the time of February through March of 2020 is when we started the lockdowns? Changed the world forever. It did. And that is what I wrote. And I put here, by this time of this writing of 2017, and in this book, predicted it, did numerous videos warning people on YouTube as well. But because I was able to predict that, I thought, you know what? I better write about the next go round when Rahu is in Gemini and Ketu is in Sagittarius. Have it in print again, in case I'm not here. You never know. So I wrote my newest book, and this is World Predictions 2024 to 2042. The reason why I have that span is I wanted it to go all the way, Rahu and Ketu, through all 12 of the signs where they will have eclipses, and all 12 signs, what that would mean. So this is how I make my world predictions, looking at where Rahu and Ketu are, because they cause eclipses, but also if they're coming together with either Saturn, Jupiter, Mars is the big trigger, and if they are with any of the outer planets, this will truly trigger incredible events that may not be so pleasant. So the year that I focused in on was the year of 2037 to 2038, because this is the years that Rahu and Ketu will be back in their most destructive signs and nakshatras. So this is going to be where Rahu is in Gemini and Ketu is in Sagittarius the very next time. 2020 was the last time. So that gives it another 18 and a half years. And here we go. And during that time, let me just give you a little prediction around that time. So this is why I wrote this book. So it is going to be 2038. Yeah, here we go. And went in here and said 2020 COVID-19, 2001 September 11th, 1982 AIDS virus, 1969 Kennedy assassination, 1945 bombing of Hiroshima. Now, what's going to be happening in this horrendous chart in the year of, and I went over a lot of other terrible things, such as, well, here's some others that are in this book that you may not know about. There was the Chicago fire, which was in 1871, was incredibly destructive. The Peshtigo fire, 1871, another fire, both that year. Then the bubonic plague was in 1666. That's kind of hard to track, but I found that. And others were Great Fire of London and Messina earthquake. Wow, killed about 100,000 people. The Chinese Civil War, which killed 2.5 million people. The Gujarat earthquake in India killed 20,000 people. Wow, this is just goes on and on and on. There's like a number of other ones. I think you get my point here, but I want to go into the chart for what we're looking at in 2037, 2038. So that will be where we have, now this is a really big one, which is 2038. I am looking at Rahu will be with Uranus, and it's actually, I'm seeing more than that. Okay, here it is. I know when it lines up. Here it is. This is explosive day. I have May 3rd, 2038. Rahu is conjunct Mars. These are all in Gemini. Rahu is conjunct Mars, Uranus, and Jupiter. In Gemini, opposed Ketu in Sagittarius. This will be an explosive event because Uranus is sudden, unexpected events, whereas Jupiter magnifies it. And remember, Jupiter being eclipsed by Rahu is horrendous, but Mars is the trigger as it comes into Gemini on that day. And I think I gave you some other predictions, which I'm looking at the year of 2030. This is not when Rahu is in Gemini or Ketu in Sag, but 2030 and 2031 looks astronomically difficult as well, because remember what I'm looking at in this book are the eclipses. But my whole point with this video was to tell you what it was like, because I'll never forget, I went to a conference, the Sedona conference where I was speaking, and this was in 2019. I believe it was in November. It was. And I remember Ronnie Geldreyer, my good friend, we were there at the conference table. We were talking about the eclipses because she's really big into eclipses like I am too. We were talking about how something horrendous was about to happen in early 2020. Her and I were the only ones that were really talking about it. And I remember talking to a lot of the teachers and going, what are you talking about? There's going to be a big major event. And I said, yeah, don't you see it? Look what's going to happen. And they were just shaking their head at me like I didn't know what I was talking about. Please stop it. But Ronnie was with it. We were sharing our thoughts. And of course, my other friend, Juliana Swanson, we were all talking about this event that we saw astrologically coming. I kind of thought it was a terrorist event just because 2001 was, but actually it kind of was. And it did change the world forever, just like I predicted. So with that, I hope you enjoyed my series and this particular episode on how I was able to predict the COVID-19 event. So thank you for watching.